Hi, it's Katrina. You won't believe what scientists have recently found. They have been hard at work in the desert, staring at the sky, and diving deep in the ocean, finding all kinds of things from a lost race of giants living in Patagonia to some crazy marine creatures. You won't want to miss these recent discoveries, so grab a snack, hit that subscribe button, and let's go! The giants of Patagonia. Have scientists found proof of an actual lost civilization of giant people? From the colossal Norse beings to the towering Greek titans, the biblical Goliath, or even the Chinese Pangu, giants have been mentioned in cultures all over the world throughout recorded history. Practically every country around the world has tales and myths about giants. And among all these tales, there is one unusual giant that stands out: the mysterious Cap d'Oie. For a long time, people have thought that Patagonia was home to giants. This belief goes back to a story told by the explorer Ferdinand Magellan. During his travels, Magellan stopped with his men on the beaches of South America. They had landed in Patagonia and went inland to explore. It's said that they encountered indigenous people who were twice the size of a normal human. This is likely because some of the natives living in the region, most notably the Tehuelche, did happen to be larger than the average European was back then. This height difference could have been exaggerated, leading to the lasting myth that Patagonia was once a land of giants. But was that really all it was? A myth? Could it be possible that a few real giants roamed the Patagonian landscapes in the past, with Cap d'Oie being an extraordinary example of said giants? Well, let's back up a bit. Let me tell you more about this mysterious Cap d'Oie. He was supposedly a 12-foot tall behemoth. He was a giant by any definition of the word. He towered above normal folk and likely terrified them. It wasn't just his height that was intimidating, though. It was the fact that he had 2 heads. There are 2 stories that seem to conflict with one another when trying to understand the origin of the Cap d'Oie giant. According to the first narrative, Spanish sailors encountered Cap d'Oie around the year 1673 on the beaches of Patagonia. The giant monstrosity was then captured and taken prisoner on their ship. The sailors supposedly strapped Cap d'Oie to the vessel's mast for the return trip home. However, the giant didn't stay shackled for long. He broke free of the mast and then turned his sights to his captors. He attacked them, but he didn't win the fight. Cap d'Oie was killed when a pike pierced his chest. Later on, in the 19th century, the giant's preserved body somehow found its way to Britain, then to the United States. And in America, Cap d'Oie became a focal point of countless freak shows and sideshows. The preserved body of the 2-headed giant from a foreign land absolutely captivated audiences. On the other hand, an alternative account of the discovery of Cap d'Oie suggests that the giant was already dead when he was found on the Patagonian beach. Someone had impaled him through the chest with a spear. The death of Cap d'Oie is rather consistent in both stories. But in this version of events, Paraguay natives found the lifeless body and mummified it. They then incorporated the giant into their religious practices. But not long afterward, George Bickle, a British captain, heard about this unusual discovery. He then successfully infiltrated Paraguay and stole the remains of Cap d'Oie. And after the body snatching was done, he brought the giant's body back with him to Britain. In both versions, the body ends up in the possession of showmen who add the giant to their collection of curiosities. But there is still speculation as to the authenticity of this tale. Some believe the story to be genuine, but others are convinced that it's nothing but an elaborate hoax. If giants really did inhabit this region in the past, it would change everything we thought we knew about history. So, is there any actual evidence that titans existed in Chile and Argentina? There is. But again, this evidence is highly debated. The body of Cap d'Oie is just one piece of the puzzle. It's still around, kept on display at a museum in Baltimore, Maryland. Maybe you've seen it. Allegedly, the body was examined in the 1960s by physicians who claimed that it showed no obvious signs of it being a phony. But since then, no other experts have re-examined it. This is rather odd because you would think that scientists would be foaming at the mouth to analyze such a specimen, yet nobody seems interested. It's as if everyone has already made up their mind about Cap Trois being a convincing fake. There are also numerous giant footprints that have been found all over the globe. One such footprint was found in Paraguay. Scientists are beginning to dismiss these footprints though, saying that ancient peoples could have simply carved the prints by hand. But of all of the things to draw, why do all of these cultures choose to draw feet? What do you think about the possibility of giants living in Patagonia? Could the stories told by ancient explorers have some truth to them? Let me know what you think in the comments below. The bizarre star. Deep in space, 13,000 light-years away from Earth, scientists have stumbled upon a stellar mystery that could change everything we know about stars and how they die. They have found a very unusual star that has an elemental makeup that doesn't match any existing theories. Normally, a star this massive would collapse into a black hole, but not this one. Its discovery challenges our understanding of star explosions and how heavier elements in the universe are formed. It's like solving a cosmic puzzle that's been baffling astronomers for ages. The story began with Subrahmanyan Chandrasekhar's groundbreaking revelation that stars eventually die. Stars explode in supernovae, creating elements beyond hydrogen and helium, which eventually form new stars. But while studying data from the Sloan Digital Skies survey in 2023, researchers noticed something peculiar: a star behaving strangely. They used powerful telescopes to get a closer look and were very surprised. According to Alex G., the astronomer leading the investigation, everything about it was weird. The star's elemental composition hinted at a different kind of explosion, one we've never witnessed before. The star likely belonged to the universe's earliest stars, which exploded and gave birth to a new generation of stars, including the one that is now under scrutiny. Imagine witnessing this colossal explosion in the ancient skies, an event so powerful it could have dwarfed an entire galaxy. Another researcher on the team, Sanjana Curtis, explained that this discovery hints at a lost first generation of stars in the universe. It's like stellar archaeology, digging through the remnants of ancient stars to uncover secrets of the cosmos. In honor of this cosmic enigma, the scientists affectionately dubbed it the Barbenheimer star, a combination of the two biggest movies from the year of its discovery, Barbie and Oppenheimer. And now for a quick break, because it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you again to Luciano. This helps us make more videos and more animations and all kinds of stuff, so thanks again! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The Eeka Geoglyphs. Get ready for a wild adventure deep into the heart of ancient Peru. This new archaeological discovery in the Eeka region is about to blow your mind. For a long time, the Eeka area was known as a hotbed of ancient astronomical and religious wonders. And now, researchers have found something truly amazing. A team of students and archaeologists from the local university just uncovered 29 massive geoglyphs depicting felines and human figures. These massive artworks, some stretching over 130 feet long, were etched into the hillsides around the districts of El Ingenio and Changuillo. These artworks are really old, from about 300 BC to 100 AD, when the Paracas and the Nazca cultures were around. Geoglyphs are those giant figures and designs that get carved into the landscape, like the famous Nazca lines. But these newfound feline and humanoid shapes take things to a whole new level of prehistoric awesomeness. According to the lead archaeologist Omar Bendezu, these massive carved felines were likely viewed as sacred deities by the people of that time. In fact, the team found that the geoglyphs are all oriented towards the legendary Nazca lines. So maybe they were part of some grand ancient ritual or cosmological system. And the best part is, this is just the start! The researchers want to keep studying these new sites to figure out exactly what they mean and why they're important. Who knows what other mind-blowing secrets about ancient Peruvian culture are still waiting to be found. From the famous Nazca lines to these colossal feline geoglyphs, it's clear that this part of the world was home to some seriously advanced ancient civilizations. And with technology like drones and specialized mapping software, archaeologists are finally able to uncover the full scale of these monumental prehistoric achievements. Looks like the great mysteries of ancient Peru continue. The more we know, it seems the less we know. Oldest long-necked marine reptile. Let's take a trip back in time to the age of sea monsters. A fossil of the mysterious marine reptile known as Trachylosaurus fischeri, close enough, has been hiding a remarkable secret, one that's just been uncovered by a team of paleontologists. Turns out it's the oldest long-necked reptile ever discovered. This peculiar creature was first discovered and described in the 19th century. It was found buried in layers of Middle Triassic rock in Barenberg an der Saale in Germany. The fossil has long puzzled scientists, but now an international research group led by Dr. Stefan Speakman has cracked the case. And let me tell you, the results are nothing short of evolutionary dynamite. Trachylosaurus fischeri is like the grandpa of all the dinosaurs that have been found so far, dating back a whopping 247 million years. This find represents a crucial evolutionary development that occurred in the wake of the catastrophic Permian-Triassic mass extinction event. 90 to 96% of marine species and approximately 70% of terrestrial species were wiped out, but like a phoenix, from the ashes rose the Trachylosaurus. By comparing the German fossil to new discoveries from China, the researchers were able to link Trachylosaurus to a similar long-necked reptile called Dinocephalosaurus. This link helped them finally figure out how to classify this weird and ancient creature once and for all. The Trachylosaurus fossil itself is quite the specimen. Its skeleton is scattered and jumbled within the rock, but the researchers were able to discern its unusually high number of vertebrae, a key identifying feature. They even found ancient footprints of land animals preserved alongside the marine reptile's remains. This rediscovery is an important step toward unraveling the rapid diversification of life that took place after the Permian extinction. It just goes to show how much more there is to learn from revisiting and reanalyzing historical fossil collections. All those things get put in drawers for hundreds of years. Lost Valley of Cities. Archaeologists have just uncovered a mind-blowing ancient civilization deep in the Amazon rainforest. It's like something straight out of a movie. Looks like Indiana Jones used to pack his bags and get back out there, because the hunt for lost cities and forgotten civilizations is far from over. Turns out, this lost world was home to at least 10,000 people who lived there around 2,000 years ago. That's around the same time as the Roman Empire over in Europe. Who knows, maybe the two civilizations knew about each other, although it's not likely. The first clues were spotted over 20 years ago by an archaeologist named Stefan Rostein. But back then, he wasn't sure what it all meant. Fast forward to 2023, and scientists have used some high-tech laser mapping to reveal the full extent of this ancient settlement. It was an entire network of villages, roads, and ceremonial structures, all hidden under the thick jungle canopy of Ecuador. The largest roads were over 30 feet wide and stretched for miles. And get this, there were over 6,000 earthen mounds that people lived and worshipped on. Researchers think this lost valley of cities was inhabited by a group called the Upano people for nearly a millennium, from around 500 BC to 600 AD. That's seriously impressive. At its height, some experts believe it may have been home to hundreds of thousands of people. It would have been the size of ancient London. Can you imagine the organizational skills and labor that would have been required to build this ancient Amazonian civilization? We're talking about a network of villages, ceremonial structures, and thousands of massive earthen mounds, all constructed without the benefit of modern machinery or technology. Building something on that scale in the dense Amazon jungle must have taken an incredible amount of coordinated planning and manpower. The people of this lost valley of cities had to organize large work crews, allocate resources, and execute complex construction projects across a wide area. The logistics of it all would have been an enormous undertaking. It just goes to show how advanced and sophisticated these Amazonian societies really were, way before Europeans ever showed up. This discovery is flipping our understanding of the region on its head. The Amazon is no longer just a pristine wilderness. It was teeming with complex civilizations all along. Archaeologists are still piecing together the full story, but it's clear that this lost world was a real powerhouse in its day. Who knows what other amazing ancient sites are still waiting to be uncovered in these rainforests? The Shroud of Turin. For years, there's been a big debate over whether a famous religious relic called the Shroud of Turin is the real deal or not. It's supposedly the burial shroud that wrapped the body of Jesus after his crucifixion. Scientists have argued for decades over its authenticity, but new scientific tests have just thrown a major curveball into the mix. The fresh debate started in 2023, just last year, when an American archaeologist named William Meacham got permission to study some tiny threads from the shroud. He sent them off to a lab in Hong Kong, and the results were astonishing. The flax used to make the linen fabric came from the Middle East, specifically the region that is now Israel, Lebanon, and parts of Syria and Jordan. This is a huge deal because it challenges the idea that the shroud was just some medieval forgery created in Europe. I mean, if the materials point to a Middle Eastern origin, that lines up a lot better with the shroud supposedly being Jesus' burial cloth, right? Well, that's what Meacham is claiming. Over the years, there's been all kinds of research and analysis done on the Shroud of Turin. In 1978, a team of American scientists got the rare chance to study it up close and personal for a whole week. They couldn't explain the mysterious image on the cloth, but they did confirm that it came from a real human body. Then, in the late 80s, some carbon dating tests seemed to date the shroud to the Middle Ages. But more recent studies in 2012 and 2015 have suggested that it could be from the time of Jesus after all. And get this, in 2017, a team of Italian forensic experts did a deep dive into the imprint and found evidence that it matches the injuries Jesus suffered during his crucifixion. They even think the cause of death was a heart attack brought on by the trauma. So what are we to make of all this? Well, the debate rages on, but this new evidence about the flax is a pretty big deal. It's making a lot of people rethink things. Could the Shroud of Turin really be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ himself? For now, the search for the truth continues. The Pharaoh's Medallion. There is an Egyptian pharaoh that may have been an alien. The discovery of an ancient medallion could change everything we thought we knew about Egypt's past. You may have heard of Pharaoh Akhenaten, and you definitely have if you've been watching this channel, but how much do you really know about him? We know that he ruled Egypt between 1353 and 1336 BC. Under his leadership, Egypt abandoned its traditional polytheism. Akhenaten introduced a new religion, Atenism, which centered around the worship of one deity, Aten, the sun god. But after Akhenaten's death, things went right back to the way they were before he took the throne. Apparently, people miss their old gods and goddesses too much. But what made him do this in the first place? What gave him the idea to worship one god and make everyone else do it with him? We also know that Akhenaten was pretty bizarre looking, and I'm not talking about funky fashion choices here. What I mean is that Akhenaten didn't look like a normal man. He had strange feminine hips and an elongated skull. He also had a pronounced chin and a nose that stood out in a crowd, if you know what I mean. He had long arms and a protruding tummy. Akhenaten's distinctive physique was definitely raising eyebrows back then. And here's where things get really interesting. Rumor has it that Akhenaten owned a mysterious medallion featuring a flying saucer and even the head of a gray alien. The medallion was supposedly discovered in an Egyptian tomb by a man named Professor Winwood, but that's about all anyone knows about this artifact. It's not clear when it was found or from what tomb it was excavated. Take a look at it for yourself and tell me what you think. Could this be evidence of extraterrestrial involvement in ancient Egypt? And if so, where is this mind-blowing medallion now? Well, unfortunately, it seems to have vanished into thin air, leaving us with more questions than answers. But hey, who doesn't love a good mystery? Some people have taken this medallion as proof that Akhenaten wasn't exactly who he claimed to be. Some even think that this could be evidence that he was an alien himself, or at least part alien. And given his bizarre appearance, it's no wonder why people think that. There is a whole lot of speculation surrounding ancient aliens and Akhenaten, and the debate is as heated as ever. From official stances to wild theories, everyone's got an opinion. What's yours? Let me know in the comments. Tiny worm, giant eyes. Get ready to dive into the bizarre and fascinating world of the Vanadis bristleworm. These little guys are evidence of just how insane evolution can get. They were recently discovered in the Mediterranean Sea, and man, are scientists excited! First, let's talk about how downright strange these marine worms are. They mainly live off the coast of Naples, Italy, a city that is no stranger to weirdness itself. But these worms really take the cake. They belong to a group called Polychaetes, which basically rule the seas with over 10,000 different species. And get this, they have somehow survived 5 mass extinctions. These critters are super resilient and adapt to nearly every environment they are placed in. Now, the most mind-blowing thing about the Vanadis worm is its eyes. I mean, they're massive, 20 times the size of its tiny head. Can you imagine if we had eyes that big? We would look crazy and probably need forklifts to get around. So scientists have been really curious about why these worms evolved such gigantic peepers. It turns out that the Vanadis worm has some seriously impressive eyesight, on par with mice and rats. And that's pretty incredible for a simple little worm with barely any brain at all. Researchers think these big eyes help the worms see in the dark at night when they come out to feed, and they might even be able to detect UV light and bioluminescent signals, things we humans can't see. The scientists think the worms might use this hypervision for some kind of secret communication, maybe related to mating. Imagine a bunch of these little worms flashing each other in the blackness of the deep sea, like some wild underwater nightclub. But the real kicker is that these worm eyes might hold the key to some groundbreaking technological innovations. Researchers are already working on trying to replicate the mechanisms behind the worm's vision, hoping to apply it to things like computer science and artificial intelligence. Their super simple nervous system somehow processes all this visual info like a champ, so cracking that code could be a game changer. I guess you can never underestimate the hidden genius lurking in the most unexpected of creatures. These Vanadis worms are making even the smartest scientists feel like they have a lot more to learn about the natural world. Bronze Age network of communities. Most archaeologists already knew that the biggest structures in the world, prior to the Iron Age, were Central Europe's Bronze Age megaforts. But what they didn't know was that those megaforts were connected together. Yep, in early 2024, archaeologists discovered that 100 massive sites were connected by a previously unknown network. They now believe that these sites were all stitched together, creating one massive and complex society. New satellite and aerial images unveiled the network. According to one of the authors of the study, Barry Malloy, the people living within this network of sites must have numbered into the tens of thousands. The communities living around these Bronze Age megaforts didn't stand alone. They were part of a closely related and codependent society. The discovery of these sites through the use of satellite imagery is a significant development in the field of technology-assisted archaeology. This mirrors the earlier identification of 396 undocumented Roman forts in Syria and Iraq using Cold War-era satellite data. That's right, just under 400 structures were found using satellites. Isn't that amazing? It's also kind of terrifying, right? Can these satellites peek into our homes too? Probably. These findings expand our understanding of ancient societal networks and settlement patterns across the region. By utilizing advanced remote sensing technologies, archaeologists are able to detect subtle landscape features. They can also find buried structures that would be difficult to identify through conventional field surveys. The new sites were all found near the Tisza River, and all of them were within 50 miles of each other. Through excavation, ground surveys, and geophysical prospection, the team concluded that most of the sites were established sometime between 1600 and 1450 BC. They were likely maintained until all of these megaforts were abandoned around 1200 BC. Because the sites were so close together, archaeologists believe that this wasn't a highly contested region between multiple kingdoms. Instead, they think it was a cooperative community that acted as a major hub for the region. Deep sea discovery. During an expedition in early 2024, just this year, off the coast of Chile, deep-sea explorers unearthed over 100 potentially new species, adding to the immense wild diversity of ocean life. Each of the 10 seamounts they explored revealed a unique ecosystem, like uncovering different chapters in a thrilling underwater story. Dr. Seuss himself couldn't dream this stuff up. Picture ancient coral forests, clusters of sea urchins sporting cactus-like spikes, and gardens of glassy sponges clinging to underwater mountain ranges that soar thousands of feet from the ocean floor. This underwater expedition was no ordinary adventure. Using high-tech underwater robots, the research team dove more than 14,000 feet below the surface, collecting mysterious specimens from the deep. And now that they are back on dry land, scientists will study these creatures' body structures and genes. Among the newfound marine life are ghostly white sponges, lobsters with beady eyes and barbed legs, and a whole array of corals, sea urchins, sea stars, and sea lilies. From marine parks to uncharted waters, this expedition proves that there is still so much to explore beneath the ocean. Javier Seyanes, one of the scientists leading the charge, described the trip as hitting the jackpot for sea sponges. They discovered a bounty of marine life where only a few species were previously known. Ancient Kingdom Temple. Phanagoria is an ancient city that's located on the Taman Peninsula in southwestern Russia. This place was buzzing with life in the middle of the 6th century BC. It was founded by Greek settlers right by the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. Something incredible was recently uncovered in the city by archaeologists. Can you guess what it was? I'll give you a clue. Jesus would have prayed here, and others would have gathered here to worship their god. They found a synagogue, one of the oldest synagogues ever discovered. Phanagoria wasn't just your average city. It flourished for more than 1,500 years and became a major hub in the region. It was even one of the important capitals of an ancient kingdom called the Bosporan Kingdom. This empire is sometimes called the Jewel of the Black Sea. The prosperity of the kingdom was mainly based on the export of fish, wheat, and slaves. But even though the Bosporans were basically human traffickers, they still made time to praise God, probably because they had a lot of repenting to do. This ancient synagogue was rectangular, about as big as a decent-sized living room, adorned with beautiful paintings and tiles. Inside, they discovered marble menorahs, tables used for religious ceremonies, and bits of fancy marble columns. Archaeologists found an inscription on a stela dating back to the 5th century AD that directly translates to synagogue in Greek. But earlier discoveries from the city, like marble tablets inscribed with the phrase House of Prayer, dated even further back, to between 16 and 51 AD. This indicates that the synagogue in Phanagoria is one of the oldest in the world. And since he was alive around that time, maybe even Jesus himself stopped by at some point to check in with the big guy upstairs. This discovery tells us that Jewish life in Phanagoria was thriving way back in the 1st century AD, with signs of a strong Jewish community. Synagogues have been around since the 3rd century BC, but finding one from the 1st century AD is pretty rare. The Phanagoria synagogue stood proudly for over 500 years until the city met its unfortunate end. In the middle of the 6th century AD, some rowdy barbarian tribes pillaged and devastated Phanagoria, leaving it in shambles. The ancient city, before it was destroyed, served as a melting pot of religions and cultures, with evidence of Jewish, Christian, and other traditions coexisting peacefully. This discovery not only sheds light on ancient religious history, but also shows us how diverse and sophisticated ancient cities like Phanagoria really were. The Blinker Wall. In the depths of the Baltic Sea lies a surprising ancient find, a mysterious underwater wall known as Blinker Wall. It's believed to be Europe's oldest man-made megastructure. This extraordinary discovery challenges what we thought we knew about how Stone Age people hunted. Blinker Wall, which is made up of over 1,300 stones and 300 large boulders arranged on the seabed, is submerged nearly 70 feet underwater in the Bay of Mecklenburg. It dates back around 10,000 years. Researchers think Stone Age hunters built it to corral and guide reindeer, taking advantage of the animal's habit of following straight lines in the landscape. Our ancient ancestors were pretty clever. The wall likely served as a strategic pathway to lead reindeer towards waiting hunters. Talk about a sneaky move. Originally, it was on dry land, near a lake where reindeer gathered, showing how early European hunter-gatherers understood their environment. While similar structures exist elsewhere, Blinker Wall's discovery is a big deal for the Baltic Sea region. It sheds light on a new aspect of prehistoric life. The wall was found during a routine sonar mapping in 2021 off the German coast. Blinker Wall's existence proves that sometimes archaeology can surprise us, and it hints at even more amazing finds hidden under the waves. As scientists explore further, we might learn even more about our ancient ancestors and their genius hunting techniques. maybe they were a bit too good, because after that, a lot of ancient species went extinct. Thanks for watching! Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and stick around for an older video you might have missed. Until then, see you later!
The Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples plagued the civilized world during the Bronze Age, but nobody knows who they were. In fact, nobody even knows where the Sea Peoples came from. Just like the Huns, they seemed to be a nomadic people, but favored the sea instead of dry land. In the 13th century BC, an inscription was written in the Egyptian city of Tanis, which said, "They came from the sea in their warships, and none could stand against them." These naval warriors took their boats through the Mediterranean and attacked every coastal city they could find between 1400 BC and 1000 BC. For 400 years straight, a mysterious civilization who nobody could identify brought chaos to the Mediterranean. They sacked cities, forced entire civilizations to move inland to avoid them, and even led to the fall of the Great Hittite Empire and the Bronze Age collapse, which was a sort of mini Dark Age in 1177 BC. Although we don't know where these people originated, there are a lot of theories. The Egyptians describe them as northerners, meaning they most likely came from Europe. They could have originated in Sicily or Turkey, or they may have even been the Philistines written about in the Bible. Whatever the case, something drove the Sea Peoples out of their homeland, and instead of building new cities and settlements, they lived on their boats and raided richer lands. They were basically Bronze Age pirates who had amassed such an unstoppable fleet of ships that they went on raiding until 1175 BC. That was when the Egyptian army of Ramses III finally smashed their fleet along the banks of the Nile and sent the Sea Peoples scattering. Byzantium. Byzantium is one of the many names for what grew to be one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen. It was also called the Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire. The history of this great kingdom goes back to the original days of Rome. It started out as a Greek colony, grew to be a powerful city, and then was proclaimed the New Rome by Emperor Constantine I in the year 330 AD. It was part of a strategy to better govern the Roman Empire as a whole. There was still Rome in the west, but it was experiencing some major difficulties. It was impossible for the emperor sitting in Rome to govern everything that was going on from the edge of England to their borders in southern Egypt and the Syrian desert. The empire was just too big. And so the empire that changed the world was cut in half. Just over a century later, Rome fell and Byzantium survived. In fact, the eastern half would go on to survive for another 1,000 years. It didn't fall until 1453, when the Ottoman army stormed Constantinople, the new name for the original city of Byzantium, and Constantine XI was overthrown. While the Roman Empire gets all the attention these days, Byzantium was really a much more successful civilization. They were the only empire that functioned as an organized state all the way from ancient times until the start of the modern age, besides China. Ancient Egypt. People tend to think of ancient Egypt as one great empire that lasted over 4,000 years, but it can actually be divided into three very specific periods of time. There's the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. And then there are periods that happen in between each individual kingdom, which were when Egypt was no longer functioning as a unified political power and was basically plunged into civil war. But we can go back even further to see what made Egypt one of the first great powers in the world. It all began in 6000 BC, or 8,000 years ago. That was when the Sahara Desert went through a dramatic change. Some think the earth shifted a bit, while others blame changing rainfall patterns. Whatever the case, the previously fertile plains of North Africa became a desert, and human civilization was pushed closer and closer to the Nile River. The result was that people who would have been part of wandering tribes were now forced to live in the same place and rely on the Nile for water and food. This is why Egypt got an early start and how they grew to be so powerful. It was all about geography. That desert to the west that pushed them together also protected them from invasion. there was nobody who could march across the desert to attack them, meaning they could focus on building up their kingdom rather than fighting wars on all of their borders. The Huns. The Huns were vastly different from most ancient empires, and it's because they weren't really an empire. They didn't have tons of great cities. We know little about their religion. As far as historians can tell, they never built any great monuments. The Huns were mostly a nomadic tribe. They were wanderers who rode around on horses, and there were a lot of them. What's really curious is that nobody actually knows where the Huns came from. They just kind of spawned east of the Altai Mountains, somewhere in modern Kazakhstan. The Romans became aware of them around the year 91, but they didn't appear to be any more of a threat than the other barbarian tribes. In the 4th century, that all changed. The Huns became the primary contributors to the death of the Roman Empire. They spread out from Kazakhstan and brutalized all the surrounding countries to the east. They were like a plague of locusts, only with swords. Their invasion was so severe it caused a period known as the Great Migration, from 376 to 476. The slow onslaught of the Huns caused groups like the Goths and the Vandals to be pushed closer to the heart of Rome as everyone ran from them, which was what eventually led to the Roman collapse. Still, not too much is known about the Huns. Writers from the Dark Ages describe them as bestial monsters and primal savages. But nobody really knows if these people were actual barbarians or if they had some class. All we know is that they came out of obscurity, got organized, and destroyed the civilized world. When their great leader, Attila the Hun, died in 453, his sons squabbled over the power vacuum left behind, and the nomadic tribe fell apart within about a decade. Big thank you to Shashi Oja and Candice Perry. Thanks so much for watching and supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing history. The Warring States of Japan. Feudal Japan was hardly an empire, and yet it's worth mentioning purely for how unique of a time this was in Japanese history. This was the age of the samurai and the shogun. Samurai warriors became legendary fighters during the Warring States period of between 1400 and 1600. This was a time when the military might dictate who would be the ruler of Japan and who would be forced to follow. Samurai warriors pledged their service to a lord and were bound by honor to serve their lord up until the moment of death. For most of Japan's history, there was no one great ruler. There were clans and families that fought for power among themselves like a bunch of squabbling tribes. Whichever clan or family was the strongest got to make up the rules. This was something called a tent government, and it really began around 1185 with the Minamoto clan. Even though Japan was made up of warring clans and internal struggle, they were still a force to be reckoned with. When the Mongol invaders tried to enter Japan both in 1274 and 1281, they failed and lost upwards of 30,000 troops. The biggest power during the warring period was Ashikaga, from between 1336 and 1573. It wasn't until Oda Nobunaga, one of the great unifiers, went on a bloody campaign of ruthless violence to take down the Ashikaga shogun and unite Japan, that the country was finally rallied under one iron fist. The Macedonian Empire. Ever since the Republic of Macedonia was formed in 1991, there has been argument between Macedonians and Greeks over which country should claim the great history of ancient Macedonia. Because while ancient Greece may get all the attention in the movies, the Kingdom of Macedonia was the real star of the ancient world. They became the biggest empire on the planet. It was only briefly, but it was a pretty impressive feat, and it was all thanks to the great leader Alexander the Great, and of course, his father. These days, Macedonia is a small country on the border of northeastern Greece. 2,300 years ago, Greece was a political power concentrated in three main city-states. This was Athens, Sparta, and Thebes. Then came the Macedonian king Philip II, who conquered those three states and created a federation of unimaginable military might. What had previously been independent yet cooperative Greek city-states were now part of a single political life force. But it wasn't Greek, it was Macedonian. King Philip's biggest dream was to conquer the Persian Empire, which back then was the biggest in the world, but he was assassinated in the year 336 BC. When his son Alexander came into power, he was determined to finish the job his father started, and by the time Alexander the Great died in 323 at the age of 32, he had conquered everything from Greece to India. But because Alexander had no kids, his generals fought over who would take control of the empire after he died, and it immediately fell apart and crumbled. The Han Dynasty. From between 206 BC and 220 AD, the Han Dynasty ruled all of China. They were the second imperial dynasty, but arguably had a much bigger effect on the country. It was the Han Dynasty that promoted Confucianism as the state religion, and they were the ones who opened the Silk Road to Europe. This permanently changed Chinese history, as goods flowed into the region in a way they never had before. The Han Dynasty was also behind a revolution of art and invention, and even created paper. The dynasty started following a huge revolt within the Qin Empire. This resulted in a brief dark chapter as the warlord Xiang Yu took over. But before everything could spiral out into chaos, Liu Bang seized control and the Han Dynasty was born. Liu Bang became known as Emperor Guozhu, and one of his first orders of business was to systematically depose all the kings of the individual regions in China. He then replaced the rulers with people he trusted from his own family. It was one of the most brilliant things a ruler had ever done, because it prevented uncontrollable rebellions from popping up throughout China. This gave the empire stamina to continue on for over 400 years. The First Persian Empire. The Achaemenid Persian Empire was the very first real global superpower. It was founded by Cyrus the Great in 550 BC and would soon extend all the way from Egypt to Asia and northern India. Cyrus consolidated his empire by destroying the Lydians, who had the Egyptians and Babylonians for allies. In 539 BC, the Babylonian Empire fell to Persia, and with it all of Mesopotamia. And in 525 BC, Egypt's capital at Memphis also fell to the Persians. The big thorn in the side of the Persian Empire ended up being Greece. They crushed the Persian invasion force at Marathon in 490 BC, and when the great ruler Xerxes tried again, he may have sacked Athens in 480, but his army was crushed at the Battle of Plataea the year after. For his failure, Xerxes was assassinated, and after that there were revolts all throughout the empire. This was the beginning of the end as things started to fall apart because the empire was so big that individual pockets were able to rebel. And when Alexander III of Macedon came along, the Persians were finally crushed once and for all. The Visigoths, destroyers of Rome. The Goths came from somewhere, but it's not entirely known where. We know they were Germanic, and that their devastating invasion of Europe began in the north, as they pushed south and the Huns pushed west. It's possible they came out of southern Scandinavia, then grew in number around the Baltic Sea until they began migrating. Once the migrating started, the Goths split into two groups. The Visigoths were the western tribe, while the Ostrogoths were the eastern tribe. It would be the Visigoths who invaded the Roman Empire starting in 376, absolutely smashed them at the Battle of Adrianople in 378, and then burned Rome to the ground in 410 AD. With the biggest power Europe had ever seen gone, the Visigoths traveled to the region of Gaul, which is in modern France. They established their own kingdom there, took most of the land in Spain and Portugal, and fully ended their nomadic existence. They ruled up until the 700s, when the Moors came out of Africa and basically wiped them off the map. The Caliphate. With the demise of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD, the world of Islam was thrown into chaos. And from this chaos came the Caliphate, a religious political system that governed the Islamic Empire throughout all of the Middle East and North Africa. This religious government was ruled over by one man, the supreme leader, aka the Caliph. It was the Caliph who had the authority to take care of the Prophet Muhammad's great empire, and in the beginning, everything seemed like it would work. The first 4 caliphs were actually elected through nominations and with the help of a very primitive parliament. The empire had control over most trade routes, which made them extremely powerful and wealthy. They were also famous for their organized military, magnificent cities, and promotion of the arts. Osman I began launching raids against the Byzantine Empire, and by the 14th century his descendants conquered Constantinople and brought the Byzantine Empire to its knees. They renamed it Istanbul and continued to expand. After about 600 years, the empire began to weaken and crumble, and ended during World War I. Thanks for watching! Who do you think was the most powerful civilization of the ancient world? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe and come back soon for more videos like these. Bye!